Good afternoon and welcome to Volunteering Victoria's webinar series. I'm Sarah Sterling, our Sector Development Manager. When volunteers are on the emotional front line dealing with challenging situations, it's part of your organisational duty of care to support them to build their resilience. In this webinar, I'm chatting to Trudy Della from the Country Fire Authority and Kerry Cunningham from Banksia Palliative Care about how they build and maintain resilience in their volunteer teams. Before I go forward, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land that we call Australia. Though we're likely logging on from different parts of Australia, I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So just a few housekeeping notes before I introduce our two guests. In the interest of all other listeners, please keep yourself on mute. You should have arrived on mute, but you also should be able to check down the bottom by hovering your mouse over the screen. There's a public chat box which will send messages or hellos to all participants, and feel free to introduce yourself. But if you have a question, we'd ask that you submit it through the Q&A box at the bottom of this screen, and we'll raise it with presenters at the end of the webinar. If you're having any technical troubles, please use either the public chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll try and assist you with the technology. This webinar will be available to stream shortly after this on Volunteering Victoria's website. So now, without further ado, let me introduce my two guests, Kerry Cunningham and Trudy Della. Kerry is a highly trained palliative care specialist with over 15 years of experience. Kerry has worked in both rural and metropolitan palliative care settings. She currently supports Banksia Palliative Care Services, wonderful volunteers who in turn support and enable Banksia clients and their carers and families to live their best lives. Trudy has worked in CFA's organisational wellbeing team for 3 years and has had a long interest and background in the area of wellbeing. She is currently the team leader of CFA's regional member wellbeing advisors, who are an important part of the wellbeing support services CFA provides for its incredible volunteer members and families. Welcome. Welcome, you guys.
Welcome, thank you. Hello.
So, as we kick off, as we normally do, I'd like to just ask both of our presenters here to give a little bit of, tell us a little bit about themselves and their organisation. So I'll turn to you, Kerry, first.
Thank you. So I am a nurse by trade, but I have been working in palliative care for over 15 years, and I work currently at Banksia Palliative Care. And we are a free fee expert holistic palliative care service, and we look after the people that live in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. So we cover the municipal suburbs and regions of Nillumbik, Banyule and Whittlesea, and we provide and promote specialist home-based palliative care service that's accessible, responsible and in partnership with the community. So we see palliative care as client and family-centred care that is active and supportive and enables people with a life-limiting illness to live their best lives. And a vital part of the service that we provide are our wonderful volunteer team.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, it's hard to imagine, you know, a palliative care service functioning really well without wonderful volunteers.
Absolutely.
Now, I'll throw over to you, Trudy, and it's hard to imagine anyone on the other end of the phone coming into someone who hasn't heard of CFA. But if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and the CFA, that would be great.
Well, as you said, most people would probably be aware, but CFA, or the Country Fire Authority, is a volunteer and community-based fire and emergency service organisation. We help protect millions of Victorians and more than 1 million homes and properties across the state. So it's a very important role. And as we're here on a very hot day, I think it's probably in the forefront of our minds. I've been with CFA for 3 years now as a member wellbeing advisor, and the last 18 months I've been in the team leader role of that group. As member wellbeing advisors, we offer a range of educational and awareness programs that promote strategies to improve and maintain positive mental health and wellbeing and build resilience in our members. Member wellbeing advisors also provide coaching and support to members and promote awareness of wellbeing support services, how to access them and the importance of accessing them early. And as member wellbeing advisors, we're supported by a growing organisational wellbeing team from headquarters, and that includes a great peer support program, which are a really important part of that team, and we'll talk about those more later.
Wonderful. And I guess one of the things that we find so common in volunteer management is that everybody often comes to volunteer management from different backgrounds. So I guess I always like to ask, what is your first role in volunteer management? Is this your first role in volunteer management? A little bit of an origin story. How did you find volunteer management? So Kerry, I'll throw to you.
So this is my first time managing volunteers. I've worked with them throughout my nursing career and especially with my community palliative care, but part of my role as the engagement manager is overseeing our volunteer program. It's my first time.
Wonderful. And you like it thus far?
I love it, and I can't wait to look at expanding our different services and bringing on more volunteers.
Wonderful. How about you, Trudy?
I actually have come into this role from a background in teaching, secondary school teaching, and obviously there are a lot of volunteers that often support schools. And I've been a volunteer myself in a number of different groups, schools, sporting clubs and things like this. But this was my first work role in a team that works with volunteers to this extent. And I'm just constantly amazed at how dedicated they are, how much they're prepared to give, the incredible work that they do and the difference that they make. They are amazing.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yes, and so are the people who support volunteers, who are, around with us on the web. So that's great. So I guess in thinking about this topic, building resilience in volunteer teams, we wanted to bring together a few different sectors. So I guess I'll, outline. First question really is, why is resilience important in your sectors for volunteers? So, Trudy, are you happy to start?
Absolutely. Safety is one of our key values at CFA, and I'm really pleased that more and more mental health safety is being included in the discussion about physical safety. I was at a pre-summer briefing on the weekend and it was very much a part of the discussion to look after our members, not only in terms of their physical safety, but also in terms of their mental well-being. And it's really good that that's a priority. Given the work that our volunteers do and the situations that they sometimes respond to, we really want them to have resilient strategies that they can use to cope, to look after themselves and to look after each other. And we want this for them because we want them to return home safely and be able to do all the other things that they do in their lives, but also so that they can continue to do the great work that they do in protecting the community in their CFA role. So we have two reasons really for looking after them.
Absolutely. How about you, Kerry? Why is it important in a palliative care sort of setting?
So similar to some of the things that Trudy was saying in regards to, we want to make sure that they can, at the end of the day, when they finish their role with us, they can go home and it doesn't impact their own life. Resilience is really vital because it enables them to continue to be able to provide the service and the support and the companionship respite that they do for our clients and their families. We need to make sure that they're managing okay and the emotional toll of working with somebody that they know is ultimately going to die. It doesn't impact their life. And we know that everybody comes from a wide variety of backgrounds and they all come to us with a lot lived experiences. So we want to make sure that we're protecting them from previous losses and grief that they may have had and helping them to build resilience to be able to not only manage that, but to manage and support each other as they support our clients in the community, as well as the office team as well.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I guess I was really keen to bring you two together to talk about is that, they're quite different situations or different experiences that you might have that might be potentially challenging. So, I guess for those on the other end of the line who might know less about your particular industries, Kerry, you were able to sort of talk about what sort of situations a volunteer might find themselves in that could be challenging in a palliative care service?
Sure. So we have lots of different scenarios where our volunteers are linked in with our clients and their families. It could be that they're dealing with a family that has not yet come to terms with somebody that they love is going to die and how they help to support that family and support their loved one. They could be linked in with someone for a long period of time. We've had clients that have been on our program at Banksia Palliative Care for over 2 years and have had volunteer involvement for a 2-year period, and sometimes it's as often as weekly for a couple of hours. So after 2 years, you actually build a very strong relationship. It's still professional, but it's a relationship with that family and that person. So when that person dies, then suddenly there's the loss of that person for the volunteer, not only for the family as well. Sometimes we link them in with somebody that has an acute event and dies very suddenly, so we need to make sure that we are looking after them in regards to that. It could be that there's conflict in the family. There's no such thing as the Brady Bunch, unfortunately. Just because the family was fractured before the person got sick doesn't mean they're suddenly all going to come together. Usually, if anything, it makes those things worse. So sometimes the volunteer is dealing with that fractured family in conjunction with the support of the rest of the Banksia team, but we want to make sure that that's okay. Sometimes they're dealing with somebody that has no family, so they're the only person that they're seeing from a social perspective, and it takes quite a toll on them. And also, unfortunately, Banksia also provides palliative care for younger clients. So sometimes they're linked in with younger people. It's not just old people, unfortunately, that die. So we've had a few babies and a few children and a few teenagers and early adults on our program, and volunteers are linked in with that. And that can be very confronting because it reminds them of their own families. And so we want to make sure that we look after them and protect them and help support them through those journeys.
Wonderful, thanks. That's I think really paints a picture, because you can sometimes when you conjure up palliative care services, you conjure up someone who's a bit elderly, and you don't necessarily understand the breadth of challenging situations those volunteers might be facing. So Trudy, if you'll just tell us a little bit about what sort of situations might be challenging.
Oh, absolutely. And our volunteers are often required to attend what we call potentially traumatic events. That might include fires or motor vehicle accidents, for example. And we call them potentially traumatic because we try and acknowledge that those events will affect different people differently, and some will be more impacted on others. In particular, in rural locations, it could be that people are responding to events that involve people that they know, which is an added challenge to the work that they do. Our volunteers also support the communities that are then affected by these types of events, so that adds to the layer for them. And we also acknowledge that our volunteers are people who have lives outside of their CFA role, and this means that they have to deal with personal events that any of us might be challenged by. So potentially some of the things that are happening in Kerry's space could also be happening with our volunteers. So, we're one person and we have one bucket that fills, and lots of different things fill it.
Absolutely. That's a really, I think that bucket metaphor when it comes to talking about resilience and well-being is so important. So we're going to touch on a few sections of the life cycle now, and I'll throw to you, Kerry. Is there anything particularly you do when you're recruiting volunteers to build resilience, or figure out if a volunteer is going to be suitable for the types of situations they may find themselves in?
Yeah, absolutely. We like to think at Banksia we have quite a robust recruitment process. It's multifaceted, so we invite people to come in to have an information session to gauge their interest and just to get an understanding about what our volunteer team is. Sometimes people come in and they don't really understand not only what palliative care is, but what our volunteer team is, which is companionship and respite with our clients and their families. So sometimes it's sitting in a room while the person has a sleep and you're not actually engaging and you're not entertaining anybody, but you're sitting quietly reading a book. So some people have a very different idea sometimes of what that is. So they come in and have a conversation with key team members about what our program is at Banksia. Following that, those people that are interested, we invite them to complete an application. As part of the application, we get them to come in and have a one-on-one interview with us and have a conversation a bit more about how it works. We encourage people that have had a bereavement within the last 6 to 12 months to wait before they take on the training, just because we don't want to trigger anything in them that might be brought up as part not only of the training, but as going on and linking in with clients. We just want them to have some time to grieve for their own loss rather than just rolling into the next one. So we want to make sure that they have got good resilience to start with. And then once we've done that, we get them together and we do a really robust volunteer training program, which is based on fabulous work that's been done by Palliative Care Victoria and their volunteer training resource kit. And so we focus on that, and it's got 9 different stages of the different aspects of volunteering and palliative care. And we do that, and we work closely with our bereavement counsellor and our senior social worker regarding grief and bereavement, death and dying. And then we have ongoing support once they've finished their training and one of our volunteers.
Yeah, it's a very comprehensive, I guess, temperature gauge of recruitment to make sure that people are going to be in the right space to take on that volunteer role. So I guess moving along to training, and you've talked a little bit about it, Kerry, but what type of training does a volunteer receive around resilience? What type of broader training does a volunteer receive at your organisation? And is there any variation depending on what the volunteer role is?
Yeah, so as part of training and doing the working through the Palliative Care Victoria training program, we touch on it and we talk about grief and bereavement and loss and death and dying. And then after that, we then provide ongoing training and support to our whole Banksia team and our volunteers that are involved in that. We have a robust wellbeing program at Banksia, and volunteers partake in that. And we also have access to the employment assisted program that they can contact at any time. We always encourage them to ring and have a chat, and if I'm not the right person, then to speak to the right person within a team, because we are a team. So it could be that they want to speak to our grief and bereavement counsellor, or they want to speak to our social worker in regards to engagement that they've had, or links that they've had with clients. And then we hold regular meetings with the volunteers so that they can come in and debrief with us. It allows them to talk about other things that are happening, and to be able to be in a room with like-minded people that could be experiencing the same things. We get them to tell us what we can do for them. So we ask them to let us know any education topics, and when they talk about grief and bereavement, wanting a bit more support or information about that, we do everything that we can to achieve that for them.
Wonderful. How about yourself, Trudy? What type of training, if any, does a volunteer receive around resilience, and what type of broader training does a volunteer receive at your organisation?
So our volunteers have access to a wide range of training courses in the CFA when they join and throughout their time in the CFA, and sometimes that depends on the roles that they wish to take on. So there are operational training courses that they undertake to prepare them for responding to a range of events, and they all need some minimum skills training to make sure that they're ready for that. As well as some other training, but they can also do training in terms of leadership as well, so that they can become crew leaders and that sort of thing. From a resilience perspective, we offer training through our team, so member wellbeing advisors, that looks at mental health and resilience particularly, and highlights the importance of early help seeking, as well as providing strategies for looking after yourself. We focus on the 5 ways to wellbeing in that process, so encouraging people to stay connected, to keep active, to keep learning new skills, and we highlight that being in CFA and doing those training courses is a great way of learning those new skills. We also encourage them to be present and mindful, so there is time for reflection and there's time for planning, but there's an important time to just enjoy what's happening now. And the 5th way being giving to others, and sometimes it's about reminding our volunteers of how much they give, and remembering them to take note of that. We've also recently been looking at training that we undertook from Canada. So it was a program called The Working Mind, and we've trained up some of our people to become trainers in that. And The Working Mind is a full-day training program that focuses on the mental health continuum and gets people to check in for themselves about where they're sitting on that, and importantly gives them some strategies to look after themselves, so to improve or maintain their mental health. And we've also started rolling out mental health first aid training as well, because we recognise that's an evidence-based program and we want to offer that as well. So we're just at the start of rolling those programs out through our leaders and through our members. So there's a lot of opportunities there for our volunteers.
Wonderful. So turning now, I guess, to something you mentioned a little bit earlier, and specific, I guess, support after a potentially traumatic event, as you might say in the CFA, or a situation where you might find assume a volunteer would be affected in the palliative care service, what type of supports do you have available for volunteers, and how do you go about that support? So I'll throw to you, Trudy.
Yeah. We have a range of support services that can be offered to our members, depending on the situation, including our member assistance program, which is like an employee assistance program, but we call it our member assistance program, which offers access to psychologists and counsellors. We also have an extensive peer program, our traditional peer program, and we have a chaplaincy program as well. So we're working hard to ensure that our members are aware of those services prior to needing them. So we've recently gone to a one number access for all of those services, rather than having to remember a whole lot of numbers. And we're encouraging people to become more aware of these services because you don't know what you need until you need it. And so we want to make people as aware as we can before they actually need the program. So following a potentially traumatic event, our wonderful peer program is often called in to support those who may be impacted. And our peer program is made up of volunteers, and they are CFA members themselves who have done specialised training to be able to support individuals and brigades or teams who have been potentially impacted. So they're well trained to provide initial support and to link people to specialist support services as required. But given that they are volunteers themselves and members of brigades, they have a real empathy for the people that they're trying to support, because they've likely been in a similar position. But they do a fantastic job.
Absolutely, and it sounds like they'd be in an ideal place to provide support and assistance. So how about you, Kerry? What's the process at Banksia in terms of follow-up when you feel a volunteer might be impacted or needs some support?
Because our volunteers usually work remotely, so they're going into clients' houses and we don't always see them. We have a process in place where they ring in after every single visit, so we can actually talk to them and make sure that the visit went okay. So most of the time it's usually something along the lines of, "Hi Kerry, visit went well, no problems, I'll be back in a week." But other times there can be things that the client has brought up. Could be symptomatic issues where they just need to say, "Oh, they've got more pain, we'll get the nurses to look into it." Or it could be a bit more emotional, or it could be something that's triggering for the volunteers. So if that happens, then we speak to the volunteer on that phone call. We offer them face-to-face follow-up if we need to be. We offer them an opportunity to come into the office and have a chat. It just depends on what the actual volunteer will need. And so if we think that the client might have a traumatic event, so something is happening in their care where it could come about that something could occur, then we try and word up the volunteer as much as we can so that they're aware of potential symptoms that could occur. So sometimes in palliative care we have palliative care emergencies, and so symptoms crop up, and so we want to give them as much information as we can so that should those things occur, they're not shocked and they've got that information in their back pocket and to support not only themselves but the carers.
Kerry, I think it's really fantastic that just always happens, that you have that phone call that always happens after every visit.
Yes.
So your volunteers don't have to think, "Oh, I'm a little uncertain, but I don't know if it's bad enough to make a phone call." But the fact that you've got it set up that it just happens every time,
yes,
is such a good safety net for picking up on everyone.
So we've got a designated phone that only the volunteers have, and it's always held, and it's either by the volunteer coordinator, who I work with, or myself, or if we're both away because we both won Tats Lotto. We're not allowed to say hit by a bus anymore. If we won Tats Lotto, then it's held by one of our other senior managers, and the volunteers do ring and say, "Hey, I'm with the client at the moment. I just want to clarify something. Is that sound okay? Is this right? How do we manage this?" So it's really important, because they're out there on their own, that they remember that they're part of a bigger team and we're there for them if they need us.
Absolutely, and I think so often you can, try and bat away at your own and think, "Oh gosh, I should check in, everybody's busy."
Yeah.
Is often, an attitude you can hear reflected, particularly of volunteers sometimes. So it's really great that mechanism is in place. So just to tease it out a little bit further, I guess when we were talking about the length of the relationship to the potentially traumatic event, how does this affect the type of support given to volunteers? So, for example, a palliative care, you might have a relationship that's ongoing for 2 years, as opposed to very event-specific follow-up from the CFA. Is there any impact that happens due to the duration of time? I guess it goes past, and I'll throw to you, Kerry.
So it really depends on what the situation is, and it's very individualised between the volunteer and the client. So some of the volunteers, we offer support regardless. Some of them take it up, some of them just want a phone call saying it's okay. One of the big things that we do is with our volunteers is we have a group of inactive volunteers because life changes and suddenly they did have a Monday off, but now they've got an extra grandchild that they're looking after on that day. But other times people want some time away because they've been linked in with somebody for a long period of time and they just need to recharge their own battery. So what we do is we make them inactive and we touch base with them on a regular basis, and then when they're ready to pick up a client load again, then they ring us and say, yep, I'm good, I've been away, I'm recharged, I'm happy, I've grieved that loss of that relationship. Even though they maintain a professional thing, it's still a relationship that they've lost, and then they move on. And we also, one of the other big things that we've just implemented in recent times is a final bereavement visit with the carer of the client. So once the person has died, we actually give it a bit of a time and then ring the loved one and say, would you mind if our volunteer just comes and has a cup of coffee to reminisce and say it was lovely to meet you and say goodbye. And then it closes the loop, not only for the family, because sometimes they've been in there for two years on a weekly basis, but also for the volunteers. So it allows them to pass on their condolences and say how much they really appreciated being part of that family unit for the time that they're allowed to do that. And we found that that's been really beneficial for our volunteers, and more of them are taking up that option. So it's great. And the families love it. They say, oh, that would be fabulous. I was so sad I wasn't going to get to say goodbye to whoever it was. And now they love having that opportunity. So it's great.
What an amazing opportunity for emotional closure, really. Yeah, I think that really goes full circle in a way that is both sensitive to the volunteer and their family. How about you, Kerry? Any thoughts?
Well, we have event-specific follow-up. That's okay.
I had a moment.
That's okay. We have sort of event-specific follow-up as we've previously described, so we would call in support services, but the training that we do really encourages CFA members to check in with each other at any time they might be concerned with someone. And sometimes that's because it's sometimes not just immediately after an event that somebody needs support. It might be sometime after, and there's no time limit on that. But it also could be because it's accumulation of what this person's been responding to or what's been happening in their own life. And sometimes when a big event happens, we're all aware, so we can put plenty of supports around. But sometimes when it's an accumulation of previous events, it might not be so obvious to everybody else that someone's bucket's getting full. And so that sometimes can go under the radar, and we need to be really alert for that. So it could be because of personal issues too. So the support that we offer doesn't only apply if someone experiences a traumatic event through a CFA event. It could be there's a whole lot of other stuff going on in their life as well. So we continue to promote the importance of self-care and of early help seeking at all times, and really encourage people to check in with each other and to make sure they are watching for changes in people. So when they see a change to someone's normal, we don't need to diagnose, but we do need to maybe have a conversation or encourage them to get some support. And maybe it's a number of conversations that we need to have. So, and a bit like Kerry said before, if I'm not the right person, then let's find the person who is the right person.
Great. Wonderful. So I think you guys have both touched on this a little, so we'll keep the answers to this question brief. But I know there's often sometimes a variety between whether EAP or member assistance programs are available just for staff at an organisation or volunteers at an organisation, and just wanted to, I guess, hear how that works at both of your organisations. So, Kerry?
All of our staff and volunteers have access to our program at all times. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And the same with us. We call it our member assistance program because we have CFA members, but they have up to 6 sessions with an external psychologist or counsellor, and we do a lot of work to promote the fact that it is they're speaking with someone who's outside of CFA, so they can be assured of confidentiality, which is really important. And we also promote that service for immediate family members as well, because we know if somebody who's a CFA member is concerned about a member of their family, it's going to impact on their ability to do their work in the CFA. So we support immediate family members as well, and it doesn't have to be a CFA related issue. It could be anything that's causing challenges for that particular person.
That's really fantastic holistic support. So moving along quite quickly, and we're getting close to the end of the webinar, so if anyone has any questions at the other end, we've only got a few questions left to go on my list, so start typing away if you have any questions for either Kerry or Trudy. But is there, I guess I'm curious, in terms of records management, whether you report or record volunteer resilience, wellness at your organisation, if there's been any challenges, and again, I'll throw to you, Kerry.
So as part of Banksia, we have a learning centre, and we have educators that look after all of our internal education as well as our external education. And as part of that, we keep records of all of our staff, and we have a list of all of the people that when they attend information sessions, whether they be volunteers or staff members. And so we run all organisation-wide training, and we keep a record of it, but we also organise volunteer-focused training as well. So we keep a record of that. We do annual reviews with our volunteers, and then we link in with our volunteers post a volunteer link up. So once we've linked them in with the client, we contact them one-on-one and make sure that the link works. Doesn't always work, but most of the time it does. And then make sure that they're travelling okay and that we haven't missed anything unforeseen, because they're in the home and seeing more things that we might have seen or anticipated.
Wonderful. And I guess, do you have, what training did you guys, I guess, receive to be able to identify, you know, some of these issues that might occur for volunteers? Trudy, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I've been very lucky in the professional development I've had since I've taken up this role. All of our team have been trained in mental health first aid, and many of us are now trainers in mental health first aid. We've also done psychological first aid courses, the ASSIST applied suicide intervention skills training, and the working mind training that I described before has contributed to our knowledge and our understanding. I'm also very fortunate to work with a very knowledgeable and experienced team who come with a lot of different backgrounds, and we have psychologists as part of that team, and they've been a great support, and I've learned a great deal from them as well.
Fantastic. How about you, Kerry?
As like Trudy, I have a great team that's in the background supporting me, and they're fabulous. So anytime I need some advice, I go to them, and they're always at the end of an office or at the end of a phone. Working closely with Palliative Care Victoria and the team there in regards to their volunteer information. So they run training and information sessions all the time. They have a volunteer managers group that is really useful to be able to hear what else is going on with other volunteer groups in the palliative care sector across Victoria. And then just ongoing support from our executive team and our committee of management at Banksia.
Fantastic. So again, just a couple more questions to go. So please, if you have any questions for these to sing out now. So I guess I'm curious, where do you see the gaps for practice or potential dangers in terms of support and building and maintaining resilience amongst your volunteer team? I'll throw to you, Trudy.
We see our challenge is to continue to build awareness, and as with the rest of the community, to continue to break down stigma and to make it okay for people to reach out for help. We really need to encourage our members to put the oxygen mask on themselves first. It's really important that they focus on their own self-care, and we often use the expression that you can't pour from an empty cup. So we need to help them see that seeking help is a sign of strength, and certainly not a sign of weakness. We also want them to take the time to check in with themselves often and to ask the question as to how they're travelling. whether that's ahead of the fire season or before they attend a call out, and just to reflect on what's been happening in their life, how they're feeling, and any, you know, personal challenging events that might have been taking place. But we really want them to have that thought, just like they might have a think about, you know, I hurt my knee last week, whether or not I'll get on a truck, or what else has been going on for me before I make the decision to do this.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a really good, you know, focus to have. How about you, Kerry?
One of the areas we're very aware of at Bank Series is the fact that most of our volunteers that go and see our clients are remote. So we don't see them as often as we would like to. So I'm assuming with the CFA you get to lay eyes on them more regularly in theory. Whereas so we're heavily reliant on our volunteers to actually reaching out for assistance, which is why our phone-in system that we have every time after a visit is really important, because just through those few conversations we can actually identify, because we have such good relationships with all of our volunteers. We only have 20 odd volunteers at the moment. We're looking to expand. Anyone's welcome to join Banksia Palliative Care. But I get to plug in there quickly. It just means that we can tell by the tone of a voice or things that are happening, and we can then reach out and say, look, I'm going to be in your area tomorrow. Let's catch up for a quick coffee. And it doesn't have to necessarily be relating to Banksia and clients. It can just be life in general. Like Trudy was saying, sometimes they need to just have a chat about their life that seems to be, they need a bit of a, you know, just a chat so that they can continue to do their work, and then they're fine after that. But we recognise that supporting them is one of our biggest challenges, and we're very open to that. And anyone that's got any suggestions or ideas about how we can improve that, we're very open to it.
Yeah, quality improvement, continuous improvement is so key in this space, because I think you absolutely keep on learning. So with just one final question before we hand it over, which is just, how do you as volunteer managers focus on your own resilience in such challenging sectors? It can't be easy to keep your buckets full. Where do you, Kerry?
So utilising our wellness program that we have at Banksia is always good, talking and debriefing with colleagues at work, reading, going for walks, and then in the football season going to the football and screaming and yelling. And usually I come in after a weekend with a croaky voice from yelling at the football, whether my team's done well or bad. So, and everyone knows. But it's a great release to be yelling and cheering for people and jumping up and down. So yeah.
No, it's fantastic. Very cathartic. And yeah, I always like to talk about self-care and stuff when it comes to volunteering, because I think, you know, it's really important. How about you, Trudy?
Well, there's a common theme here, because I probably go into the office with a hoarse voice as well, and I don't even know if we're on the same team, but that's very important to me. And also I am learning that I have to try and lead by example in this space, and I will admit that I've not been all that good at that in the past. CFA does provide us with supervision, so people in my team get to see a psychologist themselves regularly, and it is really, really helpful. We're also able to say that it does help to talk to somebody, so we would promote that as a strategy. But I also do need to remember my self-care and practice what I preach. Walking my dog most days is probably my focus. But I also do employ some of the strategies that we teach in the Working Mind training program that we offer. And it really is good to be able to stand up in those programs and say, yep, I do this, and it really does make a difference. If you try it, after some time, you will see that it will start to make a difference for you. So it's good to be able to talk about that in those training sessions.
Wonderful. Well, that brings us to the end of our questions, and one final question seems to have popped up, and I guess we'll take this one on notice. Participants asked if you're able to share Banksia Palliative Care resources, educational materials with the webinar participants. So we'll take this one on notice, and I have all the email addresses of those who are online and can be in touch afterwards, or potentially put you in touch with one of the presenters. So that's great. Any other questions at this stage? That seems like a no. So look, thank you all for your participation today. This is the last Volunteering Victoria webinar of the year, and it has been such a pleasure to bring different volunteer managers together to talk about different facets of volunteer management. If anyone has, we'll send around a survey and the link to the webinar will be up. But certainly, I look forward to bringing a whole new series of webinars for you next year in 2020. Good Lord. Anyway, everybody, I hope you have a lovely day, and that's the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.